All right, so recently on my YouTube channel, I got a question about why do I use Japanese terminology when I teach. Now let's lay aside the fact that when somebody's asking you if you're using Japanese, why are you using Japanese terminology in a sport that literally has a Japanese name in it, you start to question the person's whether or not they really have very deep or meaningful thinking. Imagine I walked into a capoeira gym and I asked them why they use Brazilian terminology in a capoeira gym, okay? But lay that fact aside, let's ask the question seriously. Why do I use, or specifically a lot of people ask the question also, why does Coach John use so much Japanese terminology when he teaches? It really comes down to two things. It comes down to being concise and it comes down to being precise, okay? First, let's talk about precision. When you're naming a technique or when you're trying to describe a technique or a technique name, you want to be as precise as you can possibly be, okay? The Japanese have done, especially in the standing position with a lot of the judo techniques, have done a really good job of choosing very precise names for a lot of the techniques that are used in the standing position. So say, for example, ogoshi, okay? Ogoshi literally means large hip throw. That's what the name means, ogoshi. Large hip throw, all right? It's Vinny's first class. Vinny, turn the camera on him. Have you ever done jiu-jitsu?
No.
First class. He's never done jiu-jitsu in his life, okay? Large hip throw. What are two things you know about that technique right off the bat?
Using throwing from his hip.
Yep, you're using your hip to throw him,
yeah.
And then it is a
throw.
It is a throw. So Vinny, first jiu-jitsu class. He's never done jiu-jitsu ever in his life. Never done judo?
No.
Never done wrestling. Right off the bat, just by the name of the technique, he already knows two things about it. So that's the first thing you should look to do when you guys are looking to name certain techniques. The terminology has to be precise. It has to convey information, right? If I choose random terminology that doesn't necessarily convey information, then you're probably being not as efficient, okay? Lastly, it has to be concise. It has to be quick to convey that information. So say, for example, instead of me saying, hey, do that throw where you take your leg and you reap it across your opponent's hips as you drop down to a knee, I can just say, hey, haraigoshi, and then he knows immediately what he's going for. Does that make sense, guys? A lot of times, say, for example, also in a wrestling room, right? In a wrestling room, to describe foot sweeps, they'll just say, do that foot sweep. Whereas I could say, Walter, do sasai. He knows one mechanic. Walter, dashi harai. He knows a different mechanic. Walter, kouchi. I just named 3 different types of foot mechanics, whereas if you walk to many rooms today, wrestling rooms specifically, they'll just say, oh, do a foot sweep. It's not specific enough, you're not necessarily conveying information. Make sense? Now, with that aside, today we're going to talk about the Juji Gatame situation, the Juji Gatame position. It's on the ground. Now, the name Juji Gatame literally means cross pin, okay? Once again, the Japanese did a really good job of recognizing that in this position, the strength of the position generally comes from your ability to keep a cross position with your opponent, okay? Because again, that's what the name literally means, Juji Gatame, all right? Now, anytime you're in a Juji situation, the more I can keep literally the Juji Gatame or the cross pin position between me and my opponent, the more controlling I'm going to be in the situation. If Walter manages to close his hip on mine, you will find you start to lose control in this position. Same thing applies if he manages to get his hips away from me. You will find you start to lose control in this position, okay? So the Juji Gatame situation is a position that relies heavily on you being able to keep that cross relationship with your opponent, okay? So from here, first drill I'm gonna teach you guys. I'm gonna teach you guys a drill where you're gonna look for that cross pin situation and you're gonna look to maintain it. I'm gonna start elbow to elbow with my opponent. I'm gonna have a cross face leg over my opponent's head, and I'm gonna have a cross body leg over my opponent's body, okay? Elbow to elbow, hand on your hip flexor. Do not put your hand up here, do not go wrist deep. Elbow to elbow, hand on your hip flexor. One hand on the mat. Now, first thing we're gonna do from here is Walter's gonna try to walk his hips into me. I'm gonna take my hand, I'm gonna post on his knee. So as he tries to walk his hips into me, go ahead, keep going. I will keep that cross pin situation. If I do not do anything to address his hips coming into me, go ahead. He will break that cross pin situation, he will start to create problems for me. Okay? So that's the first thing I want you to practice is he's walking his hips into me, I post on his knee, and I manage to maintain the cross pin situation. Second thing I want you to practice, he's gonna go to walk away. When he goes to walk away, I will take my left heel and place my left heel here on top of his shoulder. So now, as he goes to walk away, he will not be able to continue to move his hips out and away. If my left heel does not wedge in front of that shoulder, you guys can stand up, If my left heel does not manage to wedge in front of that left shoulder, he will manage to get his hips out and away, go ahead, and manage to exactly create that parallel position as opposed to the cross position, okay? So again, if he tries to get his hips out and away from me, I will take my left heel and I will place my left heel right on top of his shoulder. So as he goes to walk out, he can't. Lastly, Walter will take this leg and he'll pendulum up. When he does this, I will take the cross-face leg, I will flare my knee open, and I will sit him back down. Once again, he will take his left leg, pendulum up. As he does this, I will take my left knee, open my left knee, flare his head back down to the mat, and come back to position, okay? So we're practicing 3 methods of maintaining the cross position. Method number 1, posting. Method number 2, blocking. Method number 3, knee flaring, okay? On 3, 1, 2, 3.